Hey, good morning. It's Saturday somewhere on planet Earth. This is just all too funny, but I'm not surprised because this is how intuition works. Um, Sometimes labels are sort of funny. They label us as what's known as an intuitive empath. Okay, so it sort of means that our intuition is always working, which means the looking glass is always on. Okay, so the looking glass was working this morning just like that. So, because my state of consciousness cannot be captured, you'd ask yourself, well, how does that work? Well, as I've mentioned to it many times, when something comes to me that I become aware of, it means I'm aware of information, right? Information is a frequency, which means the frequency of the information is in the field. It's in the grid. It's in the electromagnetic grid. Once I know it, it's gone. If I don't write it down at the very moment in which I experience it, which is my intuition, which means that I'm supposed to know it at the time that I'm supposed to know it, then it's gone. That's it. Okay? So if it has value, and I believe it has value to share it with others, I better write it down or it's gone. I won't remember it. Now that is exactly how an artificial intelligence programmer cannot program my subconscious mind. Even though I can be aware of the things when I get distracted and my frequency is lowered by the different density consciousnesses, the frequencies that are there that I'm experiencing, it means that sometimes those frequencies can get in there and get put into my memory, even those I mentioned in my earlier videos. When my circuits were up and running around age 4, when I learned how to read and write English, okay, I began realizing that it's inverted. That essentially what it means is that when I'm reading something or I'm watching a TV program or something that is presented by a state of consciousness that represents, if you will, in this case, what I call the carnival barkers, then I began to realize that I'm experiencing something that is less in frequency than what I am, which is what love is. That's 528 on the frequency scale, okay? That's the circle of light. That's the heart wheel. That's the mind of the heart that connects to what? The creative imagination on this side, which is the female creation side, which is the birth giver side of creation. The male side, if you will, which has logic. So we use the logic and intelligence side to rationalize, or if you will, and this is what I did as a child, I have to find some sort of rationality to come up with how is it that all these beings are being programmed in their subconscious memory in which they're recording such static electricity that isn't able to power the creative mind of their imagination to create something different in their reality than what they're experiencing, because I'm experiencing what they're experiencing, which is insanity. So I begin to realize that I'm surrounded by beings that are insane. And the easiest way to logically deduce that is by looking at the result of the behavior. So now we're experiencing the result of that behavior, which accounts for all the data that I collected from the time I was a child, trying to figure out, well, how long have they been programming the subconscious memory of humanity's consciousness to go on reverse, which means instead of gaining light and gaining speed, they're losing speed and collapsing their own biosphere, which is the biological realm in which we occupy, which essentially means they're committing suicide. And they're not even aware that they're doing it because the unconscious memory has been programmed to do it without their knowledge. Well, how did that happen? Well, you can go back in time and figure it out, and it's actually pretty simple because whenever you experience something, particularly if it's traumatic, it gets recorded in your unconscious memory. This is why boys and girls, if you will, that go into combat, go into war, what they are experiencing is being recorded in their film strip, in their DNA. And thus their cellular memories are experiencing the antenna. Every cell has an antenna. If you've ever examined and done some of the research in two big microbiologists that I'm familiar with, and I looked at a lot of their work, which was Rupert Sheldrake, and the work he did with the morphogenetic field structure. I was naturally always a big fan of Terence McKenna, who was an ethnobiologist or ethnobotanist, okay, that spent an enormous amount of his life researching Gaia, how nature works, the nature of the relationship, spiritual relationship that we have with Gaia, the girl on the planet. So one of the things that I began doing, because my intuition was like working overtime as soon as I got up this morning, because that's usually when I'm asleep and I'm in the spiritual realm, I come back into the body, and then there are things that come to me. So for the last 2.5 hours, my intuition was leading me to one thing right after another. So I thought I better just start writing this all down. So I'm not going to remember the way in which it came to me to reveal to me what was happening, so I wrote a lot of it down. So what I'm about to do is to just simply recall, remember total recall? I used to have total recall, which was like a photographic memory of everything that I've ever experienced, which includes the entire DNA film strip, just total recall. But because I'd had a couple of some pretty good head injuries, including a subdural hematoma, some of my circuits had to get rewired in my brain, but my creative imagination has never left me. I still always have that, and particularly when I'm out in nature with her, it's like getting a memory wipe, as I've described before, and then my higher state of consciousness is with her higher state of consciousness, where I'm like in dreamland with her. It's just like being somewhere else in the universe where you're out there just exploring the creative, infinite imagination that you have when I'm with her to do that. Okay? And that's what it means to be with a goddess. Okay? Is where you're exploring with your higher state of consciousness because you're in peace, you're in harmony, you're in balance with her energy, okay? Her state of consciousness. And when you're wanting to be with her, you can be with her that way with your consciousness. So when you begin to realize your consciousness is like being a part of her consciousness, it's like being in dreamland. That's what it is for me when I'm with her out in nature, which is why I've spent so much of my life being with her in nature, okay? Which is one of the reasons why when I realized one of my favorite colors, even though I love indigo or purple, green has always been very special to me. Like when I wanted to get a particular vehicle, I wanted to have like a forest green. Or, for example, emeralds in particular. I am, how do I put this, drawn to emeralds. And particularly here on the Siskiyou Old Rogue River National Forest, actually, there's a place that I used to take my first wife to in the middle of the summertime because the way that the sunlight came down and hit trees that Southern Oregon has, which are very special to me, which are known as Shasta red firs. And when the light comes down and hits those branches and those needles and the bark, which has got a reddish tint to it, much like a redwood tree, but they're cedar, a fir tree, a Shasta red. It's known as a Shasta red fir. The bark looks similar to a cedar, even though it's more of a color of a redwood, a rusty color. But when the sunlight comes down and hits those needles, particularly where you have brooks or small streams that are flowing underneath the trees, the water will turn a shimmering emerald color. And it's just mind-blowing to be in a pool in the summertime, to be with a girl you're in love with, and be in an emerald pool. And there's a place up there that I call my emerald pool, okay, which is like being with Gaia, experiencing the ecstasy, if you will, of being with her, being with that color green. That's her color. Okay, which goes back to a book that he wrote that I was trying to get a copy of, which was called, where is it here? Terence McKenna, The History Ends in Green, Gaia Psychedelics, and the Arcot A-R-C-H-A-K, revival. And why is that significant? Well, if I go back here to what I copied from a website that was put up by, if you all know Leonard Horowitz, Dr. Leonard Horowitz, who was a dentist, he did an enormous amount of research. But green has a particular special meaning, which is related to 528 hertz, which is a love frequency tone, which is the heart chakra. And it is the third note on the scale, and it relates to the note Mi, and derives from the phrase mira, Castorum, in Latin equals miracle. So 528 hertz frequency is the 528 miracle because it has a remarkable capacity to heal and repair your DNA. That's right. Your heart chakra, which is known as the light wheel that I've always made reference to, has a capacity to heal and repair DNA within the body, and happens to be the exact frequency that has been used by genetic biochemists. Green, of course, is the primary color of our Mother Earth, because our planet vibrates to the frequency of love or of the heart. It is also in the middle of the color scale as seen in the rainbow. Okay? That's why green is so special to me, because she is so special to me, because I love to be with her. She's the goddess of humanity in this planet. That's why the native Indians and the clans are always with her and live in the trees, because the trees have green needles and leaves, don't they? So there's a great book that I want to write down here called Forgotten in Time. The Ancient Sol meaning sun, solfeggio frequencies by David Hulse. And then there's something remarkable here that I wanted to mention, which is Dr. Joe Puleo, P-U-L-E-O, in the 1970s, makes a reference to Genesis, chapter 7, 12-83, a pattern of 6 repeating codes around a series of sacred numbers. Now we're back to Tesla, 369. So Genesis makes reference to 369. And when deciphered using ancient Pythagorean method of reducing the verse numbers to their single-digit integers, the codes revealed a series of 6 electromagnetic sound frequencies which correspond to the 6 missing tones of the ancient solfeggio scale of music. And that, as I've mentioned before in a previous video about the 12 quantum frequencies, right, of the 12 dimensions that open up 12 stargates through the heart. So this is one of the reasons why they developed all of their microwave cell phone towers, all of their Wi-Fi, and what how do I put this? A couple of years ago when I was on the Big Island, I ran into somebody because one of the guys had overheard me talking about quantum frequency scales and unconscious memory programmers, which means that they know how to use computers using microwaves and cell phone towers and all the rest of it, which means all of the communication technology systems that they set up with their supercomputers sitting at keyboards are meant to use frequencies which represent perception, vibration, experiences directly into our unconscious memory. That's the programming. Remember I talked about the programming sitting in front of a black and white TV set in the middle of the 1950s? Hey, that thing's trying to program me. Okay? And this gets all the way back to the original videos I put up in time vectoring geospace or geometric space, which means that I understand and know if you come from higher density consciousness, okay, and then all of a sudden you begin to experience lower frequency signals, you realize because there is a difference, a speed ratio in consciousness between higher density consciousness, lower density consciousness, or if you will, no time, which means no memory and memory. So it means that I was aware of the fact as a child at age 4 that something is trying to program my unconscious memory of putting something in there that is distorted. It's a distorted frequency. Now we're back to the solfeggio frequencies that are in harmony and balance with the Creator. The harmony and balance of the cosmos. Okay, which gets back to healing all separation from the light. Healing all separation from the divine light of the living spirit from which all love comes through our heart, which opens our infinite creative imagination to raise the speed and move through the higher dimensions. That particular site that I went to, which I believe is associated with Dr. Horowitz, is Soma, S-O-M-A, Energetics. Healing all separation from the light. So here are a few things that I wrote down last night that came from Terence McKenna. Okay, so, and some things that I wrote that came from John Rappaport. Okay, so here we are. This is from Terence McKenna. What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned, neurolinguistically reinforced programmed hallucination. The next one that he said was psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned about us or that we might jump out of a window. They are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally lay down models of behavior and information processing. They open up the possibility of everything you know is wrong. And the reason for that is obvious, because you're experiencing nature, what nature is showing us, that is in direct contradiction to the cultural programming. That's the whole reason they censor everything. Is an information war between frequencies. So the cost of sanity in this society is a certain level of alienation, which is one of the reasons why when I was growing up, I thrived on being different than a robot. And that's one of the reasons why you can see today, because I experienced it in Reno, Nevada, because I was not wearing a mask. People would stare at me like, what's the matter with me? No, the question is what the fuck is the matter with you? I'm not the one who's insane, trying to kill myself by wearing a mask and depriving myself of oxygen and electrons. I'm not sadomasochistic. I'm not programmed to commit self-suicide. Okay? They are. How come? Why? Well, you might find that in a book that Leonard Horowitz wrote that I came across just a little bit ago called The Biological Apocalypse. That's another suggested reading. So what happens here, and what we're talking about here, is the cost of sanity in this society is a certain level of alienation. It's one of the reasons why by around, when was that, 2012, I'd had it. It is true to a certain degree you get burned out on all the negative current. Okay? So it's like a recharge. And one of the things that I did with Patty Shine, who is a nurse practitioner who happens to work right here in Medford at a clinic called La Clinica. And I said, listen, I want to do a study, and I eventually want to write a book and make a documentary out of it. And the reason I say that is because I had just left finishing a master's degree in education and behavioral sciences at the University of Arkansas, and was with a woman who had 5 identities as a result of all of the trauma, sexual, physical, and emotional trauma that she suffered from the time she was 2.5 years of age when her own father had incested her. Okay? So I naturally being an empath, provided a safe place for her where she knew that she would always have a roof over her head and a place in which she was not ever going to be harmed in the process of healing. But unfortunately, she had a son who did the same thing because of the same thing that happened to him. So she was always in a perpetual state of terror, of non-obedience, unless she obeyed the abuser. So she was always obeying the abuser. So you can see how the mask order plays directly into this, okay? And why it's necessary to heal with the light, the separation from the light that everybody here on this planet has experienced as a result of the abuse, to obey the abuser, okay? Which is obviously the demons in government. And this is true. This is where, when I think about John Rappaport, for example, and the article I wrote this morning where he talked about we are led by the least among us, the least intelligent, the least noble, the least visionary. We are led by the least among us, and we do not fight back against the dehumanizing values that are handed down as control icons. Tell me that's not true. How is this possible? I couldn't figure that out as a child. We are killing the living organism of this planet through ego-dominator cultural programming. That's exactly right. That's why she took the gloves off. I'm going to have to end there and finish out the last part of what I wrote down. Have a great day. I'll be back. Love you all.